So tonight, as we continue in the Beatitudes, we're going to do one that I think touches all of us and has touched all of us, and for some of us currently in it, and that is, blessed are those who mourn. And I think we've all had personal experience with that. And interestingly, this one I'm just going to say is kind of fairly easy. There's not a lot of hidden messages in it. It's pretty it's pretty straightforward. And one of the things that I think is important for us is, as I said on Sunday, I want us to see this not just as a blessing, a beatitude, but also as a promise. Because I think when we're in the midst of our mourning and our grief, it's really, really difficult to see and to understand, can I get through this? Can I find comfort? And and unequivocally, the answer, I believe, is yes. Although sometimes it's not easy for us to access it. The other thing that's important about this beatitude, in my opinion, is that when we don't claim this promise, it does a lot of damage to us. And it does a lot of damage to those around us. And what I mean by that, and I think we can all relate, is sometimes when pain is too painful, when the ouch is too painful, it's sometimes easier for us to just pull the covers up over our heads and never come out. And when I say that, I think that there is a part of the mourning and grieving process where it is absolutely appropriate to pull the covers up over our heads and not come out for a while. But when we get stuck is where, if I'm going to say the issue, there becomes an issue in that regard. I think those in the queer community, I think we have experienced grief in inordinate amounts over the course of our lives, not just the simple fact of those of us who lived through the 80s and 90s. As some people said, they stopped putting new people in their phone books because they kept having to, cross them out. And, our denomination, MCC, actually, a dramatic shift happened during the 80s when a large percentage of our male clergy, as well as congregants, died. And it shifted and changed the face of the denomination in so many different ways. And for those of us who were involved in the denomination or just flat out in life during the 80s and 90s, I think we would all attest to we've practiced this one a lot. And it's not uncommon sometimes for when a loss occurs that we're paralyzed and have no feelings. Has anybody ever had that when somebody dies, you just like checked out? Oh yeah, so-and-so died, right? And that's normal as well, because accumulative grief, especially, has it just layers and layers. I would also say, don't worry if that has happened or is happening, because as long as we start to begin to be open to allowing ourselves to be comforted, to step into some place of healing or allow healing to come to us, we'll make it through. This beatitude also, I truly believe, underlines the importance of community. Oftentimes you can say, oh, I can do church on my own. Well, okay, you can have a personal relationship with God of your understanding. Absolutely. Absolutely. But being in some type of a spiritual community, whether it's our church or another church, being in spiritual community is vitally important, I believe, to be able to find that understanding to plug into receiving comfort in whatever way it comes to you. For some, it's through Christian hymns. To others, it's drumming. Through others, it's through healing touch. There's so many myriads of ways that we can be comforted. Oftentimes, when we come together with other people who've experienced the same thing, we can share our stories. Storytelling is a huge part of our healing. And it's also a huge way of finding our comfort, not the least of which is we're not going crazy. Another, anybody felt like they're going crazy when they're in the morning? Yeah, okay. Look at Deb's like, yeah, I sure have. So there's lots of different factors. The other layer, and one of the other things besides just the sheer number of people who many folks in the queer community have lost, that makes this one important, is it's not always just necessarily mourning the loss of a life. There is the loss of a dream. There's the loss of our identity as we thought we were going to have it. Loss of anonymity, right? When we talk about Eric, it's one of the things that I think is important is, anonymity by way of, does somebody want to come out or not? Sometimes we're outed. And then what happens? Ron brought up earlier, he thought with excitement that this was a organization, that was there for folks who were trans. Well, maybe that one's not, but you know what? Bet you there's other ones, and you're absolutely right. It's something we can be of service for those who are in need. So in the coming out processes, things are lost. And even in the non queer factor, what about when we lose our health? Right? Getting old ain't for sissies. I mean, I can't say it. The loss of, for Phil, loss of, things going on for eyesight. And Tom has experienced this, and he's shared that openly in the past as well. When we lose those some physical strengths, we mourn, and we should mourn, right? If we should mourn, because if we don't mourn, then we can't get through healthfully to the next level. And some of the other things that might seem a little bit, you might not necessarily think about. When I taught this course at another time, and I asked people, what are some of the things that they lost? Somebody that they're mourning, somebody said the loss of their hair. That when, especially, women as well, but men, the loss of your hair, right? I might not think about it, but if that's a big step, lots of stuff. You lose a lot of stuff when you lose your hair, right? Oh, they're not virile, they're not this, they're not that, you're not sexy enough. All those things, right? Another thing that, sometimes we have to mourn is we have to mourn when we get sober, right? Because sometimes you have to mourn the loss of the bad behavior, right? Think about it. What did we do in our, some people have, let me rephrase that. For some people, it's like, oh, I'm not drinking, when they say, for instance, they stop doing, drinking or drugging, which then led to maybe having, relationships with people in ways that, yes, were fun, but they were self-destructive, shall we say. So sometimes getting healthy, you have to mourn the loss of something in your life. So, there's a lot of things besides just the level of losing a life. The other thing that somebody had talked about, which I think is also really important, is what is it that we mourn? And, for some people, they mourn, we're seeing it in society of, especially for folks who are white, they're mourning their place, right? This country is not going to be, and isn't now, there's more people of color than there are white people. And you know what? That loss of place we are seeing played out in horrific racial injustice right now, to the point of being afraid, being afraid of, has anybody heard the whole thing, seen anything about the fact that Disney's going to come out with a black Ariel mermaid? People are losing their self.
Yep.
Over the fact, I cleaned that one up. I caught myself. People are losing they're just freaking out because Ariel is going to be black. And I love the thing that went around. You got, if you have a problem with Ariel being black, you're really going to have a problem when you meet Jesus, right? Jesus wasn't white. No, who says Ariel has to be white, right? So we're seeing this played out, this loss of, and we're not dealing with it in a healthy way, leads to really toxic behavior, right? Leads to really, really toxic behavior. So what is it that we mourn? I mourn civility. I mourn the fact that we aren't civil and we're not decent, and that we're losing our compassion as a society. I really am grieving deeply, and have for a while, the fact that we're not a very compassionate people anymore. And some would say we never were. And I think there's truth in that. And we're getting worse.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is it that we mourn? And when we ask her, if we look at our life and say, what is it that we're mourning? It tells a lot about a people. What are some things that you mourn or grieving about now or recently? Yeah, Tom.
Well, along those lines, I mourn the loss of functional politics back in the 50s and 60s. Yeah, you'd have the Democrats and Republicans, differing, but they'd work together, make compromises. And over the past 20, 30 years, that has totally gone out, and there's absolutely no cooperation. It's only to win and not what's for the good of the country. And I really mourn the loss of an effective government.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Loss of a job. When I got laid off, I was devastated for a while, but I'm over it now. And now I'm seeing all the good things instead of the bad things of being laid off. But that was devastating at the time.
Right. When I lost my position over at Founders, I have to admit, it wasn't just a job. It was my whole sense of self.
Yes.
Who am I? What am I? Right? Because so much of me is tied up in what I do, and I had to go through a big process there, so sometimes there's multiple levels of loss. Mm-hmm. The other, when it comes to people who pass away, is not only you lose if it's a significant other, it's not only the loss of that person, it's everything that came with being with
Whole lifestyle.
Person.
Yeah.
My birth mom talks often about the fact that, once her husband died, she wasn't invited to things anymore because she was seen as the, single woman. So she wasn't invited to the couples parties anymore.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What else can you think of? Yeah, Phil.
Well, now that I'm completely retired, I've lost a lot of what I considered my identity.
Oh, right.
So it forces you to really look inward and think about what's left.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I still pursue the same interests. That hasn't stopped. I retired from music, but all of a sudden I find I'm getting interested in Wagner again, which I always had a love-hate relationship, there. And I retired from the law, but in the middle of the night, I'm reading the Dobbs decision and Roe versus Wade and trying to understand what the fuck happened.
Right.
How did this happen? And while I was doing that, I read a lot of the gun decisions that have come down. And there I can assure you, we really got fucked over. We really got screwed by the Supreme Court with these Scalia and now Clarence Thomas. I won't try to go into the details, but yeah, that was bad. I was amazed watching, the Queen's funeral ceremonies, and Not a single incident. Why? It's not a gun culture in Great Britain.
Right.
We couldn't have pulled that off without at least somebody getting shot, you know.
Right.
And there's really some mourning for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's definite mourning there. Things have gotten so violent. When I was a child, I could go back and forth to school on my own, no problem. Grammar school. I would walk back and forth as early as the first grade.
Yep.
Now they're all dropped off and picked up, and I get stuck in the traffic jam if I'm not careful about when I go out and leave the house. So, you know.
Right. True.
So
Yeah.
anyway, those are some of the things, you know,
Yeah.
that I mourn.
Loss of innocence.
Loss of innocence. Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Anybody else? Can I add to that? And I think that, go ahead, Christy. Mhm.
Oh no, I feel loss of security. Celia was my personal security guard.
Yeah.
So I find I'm a little bit more scared walking around, and that's hard to figure out what I'm gonna do and how I'm gonna address that and how I'm gonna replace some of that. And I miss somebody who's taller than me to reach stuff that I can't. That's really annoying. And I just miss being part of a couple. Someone else there to help me, you know, if I'm having a bad day. And you guys have all been great, you know, but Celia had a particularly annoying way of making a joke when I was the most upset. And no one else can do that the way she did. So those are the things I miss and I mourn.
They're big. Thank you. So when we look at this, the morning.
I'm sorry,
Go,
Reverend.
go ahead, Tammy. Go ahead, Tammy.
You said something on Sunday in your sermon that just hit me at my core. And that was, we even mourn when people we don't like die. And that hit me so much in my core, because it's like, oh fuck, now who the hell am I gonna bitch about? Yeah, no, I mean, but, and then it goes deeper. It's like, what, Tammy? You're just being dramatic. You didn't like the person in the first place. Why are you so sad now? Well, because it's a life lost. No, I didn't like that person. Yeah, I thought they were a jerk. And I'm sad, you know? And it was like, that's pretty darn confusing. And what you said was so helpful, because that was confusing the heck out of me. I couldn't think. It's like, what's going on? So, I mean, that's so important, you know, grieving the loss of who we don't like. What?
And sometimes those losses are even more complex to process and to deal with than the loss of a loved one.
Yeah.
As much as we love, if you know, as much as we, you know, you think about the loss of a somebody we really love, and then the loss of somebody we didn't really love. Sometimes the latter is a more conflicted grieving process and mourning process, because it's filled with multiple feelings. And I'll just flat out say, as my therapist has reassured me, it's okay. Because we are all human, because in the end, and you said it, Tammy, it is still a loss of life.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
are hopefully all here. I know all of you, and there's a huge compassion in all of us here, so that yes, when we lose somebody, and it could be whether it's death or they move and they're not in our sphere, whatever, they're extricated from our life, grieving, even that, it's normal. You can be angry and grieving at the same time, and it's normal, and it's okay.
The other thing about that is I learned a long time ago in that little recovery program, Alcoholics Anonymous, you don't have to like everybody, but you better love them all.
Right.
So
Exactly.
I've chosen to live my life that way. Not that I'm such a, wonderful, good person, but I have to.
Mhm.
I have to, if I'm going to have any peace. I have to say, I love you.
Mhm.
I sure don't like you, but I love you.
Yeah, I don't like you, but I love you. There you go. There you go.
Anyhow, that's my take on life.
Good. Thank you. So yes, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I think on that, it's like it's mourning the loss of a chance for reconciliation.
Mhm.
That somehow, despite, and it could be an intense dislike, but it's sort of like somehow at our very core, we know that, oh, well, unfortunately, we're never going to get a chance to at least come to a place of peace, and maybe that's why it's so complicated.
Mhm. Exactly. It's the regret. It's the regret. And in all of this, I think these are important lessons that grieving and mourning give us. And they are lessons that, from a spiritual perspective, they are ones that we need to latch onto. And, let's not wait until we lose, more and more people to realize we've got to take every moment much more seriously, and don't waste time. Let's not well, we all do, but to become more intentional in our relationships, more intentional in our spiritual journeys, more in, taking the opportunity to stop and to really listen to that, that still small voice, which of course for some of us has to be clanging and resounding because we don't listen to it when it's still and small, right? These are some of the lessons that I believe that more, grieving loss and mourning teach us. And in that, we can find comfort and be comforted. We can be comforted by others around us. As Christy said, folks, I'm glad to hear, that many folks have been able to be there, to comfort and to help through the journey. But it can also come from ourselves when we allow ourselves to go deeper within, and to, as I said, not take for granted or realize I lost this. Let me not lose the next one, right? This, especially as Tammy said, the loss of somebody that you might not have really liked, reflect on it, right? Reflect on, okay, is there somebody else in my life right now that, if they were to die tomorrow, do you feel okay about where things stand? And I think that Tom said, somebody said it, it's Tom did. You don't have to the relationship may never be mended, but have you made peace? Have you made peace with the other person as well as yourself? To the, has it reached whatever level it could reach? I think having stuff hanging out there is probably one of the worst things that can happen, and it will make it so that you are not comforted if you lose that person. I always say, if you were, when you go out the door, with somebody, make sure that, you feel really good about where things are at, because, God forbid
Yeah.
you don't come home, or they don't come home, right? Don't try desperately not to have unfinished business, either with yourself or with other people or situations. It doesn't mean everything's going to be all done and perfect all the time, but at least it's a work in progress. Can we honestly say we're in a work in progress, right? With the somebody or somebody's or a situation. That was one of the key things that the mourning process can give us, and that is the ability to find ways to heal the relationships we have. One of the examples that I put in the dissertation was how ironically, the process of mourning, in that process of grief, healing can happen in ways, and connections can happen in ways that were never, you never would have foreseen possible. One of the examples I used was, a young gay man whose lover had died, and his lover's mother, a very religious woman, and they did not see eye to eye when the deceased was alive. Well, after his death, he died of AIDS, and they both came together to make an AIDS quilt for him.
Oh, wow.
A quilt for the Names Project. And sitting around it's the old quilting bee, right?
Right.
Sitting around and creating this quilt to remember the man they both loved, brought these two people together in a way they never were able to do when her son, his lover, was alive. So in this process of grief and mourning, the comfort they found was when they let their guard down to come together. Never underestimate what can happen if we leave ourselves open to the process.
Reverend Pat,
Yes, Ed. Mhm.
as you're speaking tonight, I'm reminded of that funny story. We've all heard this. If you've ever heard the starfish story, where this person is going along and there's all these starfish, and there's someone else is kind of saying, well, what are you doing? You're throwing the starfish. There's hundreds and hundreds. You're never going to get these thousands or whatever out here. And he said, well, it doesn't matter. And he said, to that one, it does.
Yep.
Yeah, it mattered to that one. It's absolutely correct. It's absolutely correct. I delved into a lot of the explanation without us actually being able to read through, although we heard it on Sunday. I do want to bring us to be able to read in a little bit more slowly to see if there's anything else that comes up for you to reflect on this Beatitude, and that is from the Beatitude itself. So the first one, Tubawun Lawile Dehena Net Bayan, is in Aramaic. I am going to ask us to hear it momentarily, just so that you can hear it chanted. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. You're blessed when you feel you've lost what is most dear to you. Only then can you be embraced by the one most dear to you. Again, that goes back to the emptying, the letting go. Once we let things go, then there's room for God to come in. And then there's me and my pithy way of saying it: get the clutter out of the way and allow the healing to come to you. And from Neil Douglas Clods, blessed are those in emotional turmoil, they shall be united inside by love. Healthy are those weak and overextended for their purpose. They shall feel their inner flow of strength return. Healed are those who weep for their frustrated desire. They shall see the face of fulfillment in a new form. Aligned with the one are the mourners. they shall be comforted. And tuned to the source are those feeling deeply confused by life. They shall be returned from their wandering. This last one here, you might say, what does all of that mean? Part of the, I'm going to go further down here. Just a second here. In looking at the Aramaic, to begin with, Douglas Slott's word, lawale can mean mourners as translated from Greek, but in Aramaic, it also means those who long deeply for something to occur. Those who are troubled or in an emotional turmoil, or those who are weak and in want from such longing. And netbion can mean comforted, but also suggests being returned from wandering, united inside by love, feeling an inner continuity, or seeing the arrival of literally the face of that what one longs for. So you can see how in looking at how he puts this forth, I think, Tom had said it, he longs for, politics to be so, to be one where you can debate, right? You can disagree without destruction, right? I when I said, one of the things I long for is and I don't know if it'll ever happen again in this society, where kids can walk to school safely and not have to worry. I wouldn't, even if we lived close, I would never have allowed my kid to walk to school. Right? And what are some of the other things that we long for? Think of anything? Peace of mind.
Well, kind of like connected to not letting your child walk to school. When I lived in Missouri, we never locked our doors. We'd go
Right.
to the store and leave the door of the house wide open. Nobody ever bothered it. There's no way in hell you'd do that now, even in that community, unfortunately.
Right. Right.
I felt this since I was a kid, that I'd like to see us do a much better job of honoring our elders and our elderly folks instead of just putting them in a home to let them die. I just think they're so much better than we can do than that.
Mhm. Mhm. Deb, did you have something you were to say? No. So the thing that he's pulling out in here is that, this beatitude, this promise is one that, sometimes it does take work, but, there is the ability to come back around. Blessed are those who are confused, who are longing, who are wanting things to be different. And the Neyahan is about, they're going to be coming back from their wandering. And when you can come back from that, there might be an answer. Yeah, go ahead, Tom. Tom.
Yeah, I'd like to, in my reflection, I came up with a couple of translations of my own. And the first one really fits what we were just talking about. Blessed are those who yearn, for their longing will be fulfilled. Tuned to the source are those who are troubled, for they shall experience the healing of their hurts. Healthy are those who are emotionally drained, their cup shall be refilled to overflowing. In the right place are the brokenhearted, for the compassion of the Holy One shall restore their wholeness.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm just looking through. One of the did you want to say anything more about that, Tom?
It's this sense that when our hearts are broken open,
Mhm,
that's where God can come in.
mhm.
And by being restored to wholeness, it's not that we're going to ever get over what was lost, but it comes to a point of acceptance and somehow being transformed
Mhm.
so that we can go on with the woundedness as, as being a part of the new transformation. And, again, going back to the archetype of, Jesus with the, the birth, the crucifixion, and the resurrection, where you have to go through the Good Friday and the crucifixion and the death for the ultimate glory. And it's not that, it came back better than ever. No, his body was still wounded. He could still touch the wounds. But in the transformation, even though there was, the damage is not undone, but there was a renewed strength and an even greater glory, which
Right.
can only make sense spiritually and not emotionally. It'll never get over that pain, but somehow it's a spiritual lesson that that transformation will make us even stronger. And as I said in my reflection, another point is that as much as we mourn the losses, if we take the focus off what we're feeling and just turn to the appreciation that of what was there to begin with, the fact that we were blessed to have that, which we mourn, that we even had that experience. Wow, what a blessing our lives have been to have gone through that wonderful thing that we have lost. And it's like, yeah, it's still a comfort.
That is, and Tom, you bring up the last point of this that I wanted to bring to is the word transformation. Mourning and grieving does transform us. It can transform us in different directions. It can transform us down a rabbit hole, or it can transform us into another place. It's really important to realize one of the things that happens in our society is that we have sold each other a message that is incorrect, meaning everything's all going to be perfect and there will be no pain, right? That if you do X, Y, and Z, everything's going to be fabulous all the time, and is going to be skipping through the tulips, not roses, because they have thorns. So we're going to skip through the tulips, and everything's going to be peachy kino. It's not true. And I think when people realize, wait a minute, what I've been told and sold my whole life doesn't come to fruition, then everything goes to poo, right? Then we question everything, and it oftentimes it comes down to, is there something wrong with me? Or something wrong with me that things didn't turn out like I was promised, right? And if what we can do instead is that when tragedy or loss or any of these things happen to us, we can reframe that loss in a way of as Tom just said, appreciating what we had and focusing our energies on that, and or realizing we're a different person now. We're a different person now. And we can give ourselves permission to be a better, different person. Right? As somebody had said about Ed, you had said a comment with it, the loss of, treating our elders well. And then, what we look at doing is we warehouse our elders, oftentimes instead of dealing with. The other thing connected with that is, and this I think really highlights this whole issue, is when it comes to health and illness and disease, the goal is life, right? If somebody dies on your watch, you failed, right? Sometimes people should not receive all of the treatments that they receive to extend a life only to live in misery. And that's controversial, and I'll just own it that that's controversial. And hear me correctly, I want as many chances as I can get, but I don't want to be a vegetable, right? I've seen it over and over and over again, the agony of people making a decision: do I keep this person on life support or not?
Right.
To what end? To what end?
Yes. Sometimes
Right.
death is the healing. We don't live forever. You're going to have to die at some point. And, in time, in God's time, that is the healing. And that would go into that transition.
That is exactly right. And so, when we focus so much on trying to run away from the reality of what is, we don't appreciate what's right in front of us, right? We don't appreciate what's right in front of us. What if we can reframe the pain, right? Reframe the incident. And sometimes reframing the pain means, I love the words of Mother Teresa. She says, just allow pain to be pain. Sometimes just allow pain to be pain. What she meant by that is, sometimes you just can't sugarcoat this. Sometimes it just is. Sometimes it just is.
Yep.
Now what? First tenet of Buddhism. Here is my, well, okay. All life is suffering. I was going to say all life sucks. Now what? Right.
Close enough.
Right. But the first tenet of Buddhism is all life is suffering. Now what do we do? And I think that is beautiful, because it acknowledges that there is going to be suffering in the world, and how we deal with it. How do we allow ourselves to grieve, and how do we comfort ourselves in that? And that sometimes that doesn't mean that we're going to turn back into the beauties that we all were when we were 20. Don't we wish? Right?
Well, the expression had to forgive reality.
You have to forgive reality. And as we have the conversation, how about, what comes to mind is, that whole concept, and forgive me for not having the name of the process, and somebody here will know it, but the whole Japanese concept, when a bowl breaks.
Oh yeah.
Right.
They repair it with gold.
Repair it with gold. Repair it with gold. Our tears can be the gold. Our tears and our suffering can be the gold that brings us back together into something even more beautiful than we were before it started. And I don't say all of that to say, let's go out and all just let it hurt ourselves. That's not what I'm talking about. How do we find a way to mourn, to process, so that we can be those bowls of gold, or as I had said on Sunday, when our hearts shatter and in 1,000 pieces, let God be the super glue, right? Let God be the super glue that can put us back together. So as we kind of wrap up for this time, what are some of the ways that you have been able to find comfort or have been comforted in a difficult situation or loss in your life?
I was talking earlier about job loss and the fact that you mourned that job loss. But one of the ways that I was comforted in losing my job was in staying in touch with some of the people with whom I used to work. and realizing that even if I had been there, it would not be the same. Many of the people that I worked with had been laid off. The cafeteria where I used to go for lunch every day went out of business. And now I get a lunch delivered to me at home every day. And I mean, some of those realizing that, that things would have been different anyway, for me was somewhat comforting. And one of the things that I also mourned was the loss of the trip to and from work, because I took a train, 2 trains and a bus. And because everybody was going the same place at the same time, there were regulars that you actually got to be friendly with. Not intimate friendships, but it was a casual friendship. And I miss not being in touch with those people that I had the casual friendships. But then I'm comforted by the fact that I exchanged phone numbers with several of them, and I was able to keep in touch with them even after my commute ended. So those were a couple of the things that helped me.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. Who else? What are some ways that you've been comforted or gotten through the other side or are getting through? Yes, Phil.
Well, at first I was thinking, I'm not sure I've ever been comforted much. However, I have a friend that I went to college with. And I think just the fact that occasionally we reminisce about people that we lost, we've gone through quite a few that we lost to AIDS.
Yeah.
And we now have the internet, so some of them we can actually try to look up and find out whatever became of them. So there was some comfort in that, being able to do that with someone that I've known for 50 years. And there was some healing there, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Good. That's great. Thank you.
I have some things.
Mhm.
Just the word comfort, comfort food. There are people who know when you're in distress or just in pain or whatever. And if they really know you and they're close to you, they're good friends, they know what your favorite food is, they'll make it for you and just plain old drop it off. And it's not just the food. I mean, it's good. It's the love that goes into the food and the fact behind their willingness to just say, I love you, here. So comfort food is a good thing. The other thing, it's like a bunch of things. It's just living life with me, walking and not having to talk about whatever it is, talking about anything except that, just so that we're a part of life and life is going on.
Amen.
Sometimes it's just, going to the movies, sitting, binging on popcorn and mindless eye candy, whatever it is that Marvel is putting out at the particular moment. So, walking, talking, playing, just, it's like a physical demonstration that life goes on and we're here and it's going to be okay one step at a time. And if a day is too much, it's an hour. And if an hour is too much, let's do it by minutes. And my assistant is here with me now. So it's just one of those. Dogs and cats comfort. Yes. Boy, do they know when you're sick, not feeling well or whatever, and they will just Velcro themselves to you and say, I'm gonna bake this out of you. So I mean, just I don't need book, chapter, verse. I don't need prescriptions, and I don't need people to tell me what, how, when, where to do. Just be. That's the be part of the be attitude. Just be with me.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
that's what I thought of.
And just to also highlight something you just said, Reverend Marianne, is that our animals and nature can be some of the most healing things.
Yes, absolutely.
No
a-
question.
and
Mhm.
experiences for us.
Right.
That's what
And
I
if-
need right now.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. Sometimes you don't need therapy. You just need your cat or your dog.
Mhm.
Right, right. And I would also say, forgive yourself and go easy on yourself. Just go easy on yourself. There is no roadmap. There are outlines for the journey, but they go in different avenues. I think again, the big thing out of this is to give yourself permission to be present in the moment. And as we do that, we can hear the voice of God in whatever way that comes to us. And that eventually, there might be peace.
When you hit a roadblock, be willing to take the detour.
When you hit a roadblock, be willing to take the detour. Because gosh, sometimes those detours take us to places that are magnificent. Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we end for tonight, is there any other last? Yes, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, for me, well, when I was, very ill, it was my dear one, family and friends. I had my little team, and especially Ron, that really pulled me through. Like I was almost, had the loss of almost all of my functions. Mental health. When I was on the medication, oh my God! But they got me through it, and and that reminds me, we can all be angels to each other.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I like, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that before all this, like having gone through emotional losses and stuff like that, is creativity and like. It was writing the songs. Writing got me out of myself and sort of expressed what it is. You've heard some of my spiritual and fun songs. Oh, there's some other songs that are just getting that agony out. That really helped.
Right. And Tom, that is actually probably as important as the animal concept, right?
Mhm.
I mean, if anybody watching Christy, and she's talked about it over the course of this last year, painting has become,
Yes.
allowing the stuff to move through us. Music, writing. And that is really vitally important because sometimes and oftentimes we need to get out of our heads.
Right.
I was just going to say something like that. It's like, so everything's stuffed up in my brain with all this shit that's going on. Instead of, I'm not quite sure how to say it, but giving it back to me so that I'm okay. Does that make sense?
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
It's hard to do right now.
Yeah. Well, and then one of the other ways of helping to get us through is, I think all of us can agree, is also music. And I don't know about y'all, but
I have to have music.
I've cranked up a song or two or three, and it took that for me to get to my heart. It had to bypass my brain. And so with all of that, I decided I'm going to close us out with this for tonight, to be a good reminder that it is well.
Grand earth has quaked before. Moved by the sound of his voice, and seas that are shaken and stirred can be calmed and broken for my regard. well with me. And far be it from me to not believe, even when my eyes can't see. And this mountain that's in front of me will be thrown into the midst of the sea. And through it all, my eyes are on you. And through it all, it is well. And through it all, my eyes are on you, and it is well. It is well. So let go, my soul, and trust in Him. The waves and wind still know His name. So let go, my soul, and trust in Him. The waves and wind still know His name. So let go, my soul, and trust in Him. The waves and wind still know His name. The waves and wind still know His name. And it is well with my soul. Sing it out. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well. It is well with my soul. Sing it out. It is well. Oh, it is well. It is well with my soul. Because of who you are, Lord. Oh, it is well with my soul. It is with my And through it all, my eyes are on you. And through it all, it is well, Lord. And through it all, my eyes are on
I miss.
So a good reminder.
Mhm.
It doesn't
Beautiful
have to
song.
be perfect. Isn't it beautiful? Yeah. Nice.
I
It's a
love that
beautiful-
song.
Yeah. It's a beautiful arrangement. All right, friends. It is well, even if it sucks. But hopefully we can find some joy in there too. So
I think so.
I think so too. All right. Well, I will see you all Sunday, if not before. So
Love you all.
be well.
Love you guys.
Thank you.
Bye,
Are
Phil.
you still,
Take care.
um,
Yeah,
Reverend
stay on.
Pat still wanted me to stay on?
Yeah,